Welcome to the Wanderers History Podcast. This is Vlad Zamfira, and today we'll conclude the Malta Miniseries by looking at the immediate consequences of the Great Siege of Malta from 1565 and the long-term consequences of the Ottoman failure to capture the island. Consequences that would have strong implications for Mediterranean geopolitics for the rest of the century. The Siege of Malta had ended with a very narrow defeat for the Ottomans, who for more than 3 months had constantly bombarded the heart of Malta, mainly at St. Angelo, St. Elmo, and St. Michael. Though they had tens of thousands of soldiers and auxiliaries, an incredible amount of ammunition, and the likes of Piri Pasha, Mustafa Pasha, and Piri Reis spearheading and orchestrating the siege, the Ottomans failed to take over Malta, as they did in 1522 at Rhodes, again against the Knights of St. John. The dedication of the Knights, of course, was quintessential. They had not surrendered, and they had fended off attack after attack from the Turks. Jean de la Valette's defensive organization was crucial, and the very late arrival of Garcia Toledo's relief force was the final element that forced a depleting, somewhat exhausted and frustrated Ottoman force to withdraw. But as Francisco Balbi said, it was the constant tension and arguments between the two main Ottoman commanders, Piale, of the navy, whose safety he constantly prioritized at the cost of refraining from a full frontal attack, and Mustafa Pasha, general of the land forces, which prevented the Ottomans, all in all, from having a cohesive, more unitary attacking strategy in Malta. Had Mustafa went to Mdina with 10,000 soldiers, as he initially wanted to, the outcome of the siege would have been drastically different. Instead, the Ottomans threw almost everything they had on arguably the strongest outposts of the Maltese defenses, thinking that in 2 weeks, or less, they would take St. Angelo, St. Michael, and St. Elmo, and then Birgu, Mdina, and Gozo, thus succeeding in what Suleiman the Magnificent saw as a necessary conquest in his latter stages of his reign. Alas, in the end, the defending forces at Malta repelled the Ottomans. From a strategic point of view, the main victor at Malta was ironically Philip II, the one who lost almost nothing in terms of military and navy, as Garcia Toledo was adamant at preserving a fleet that had been severely damaged at Gerba half a decade earlier. Malta was an important shield for Sicily, which in turn was an important granary for Italy and Spain, and most of the Italian duchies and republics under strong Spanish influence, counting here Naples, Florence, and Genoa. Malta was a vital nexus point between Tunis, which Don Juan of Austria reconquered for Spain in 1573, and then Tripoli, Sicily, a bastion of Western Christendom vital for Spain, Italy, and the papacy. Had the Ottomans succeeded in 1565, they would have had a solid base, which would have been of extreme importance in any other further campaigns against Naples, Sicily, and Spain. The failure at Malta was a blow for Suleiman the Magnificent's reputation. As I wrote in the first chapter of my paper entitled The Decline of Venetian Imperialism 1559-1581, the causes and consequences of the Fourth Ottoman War, the loss of Cyprus, and its impact on Mediterranean geopolitics, I argued that the Ottoman conquest of Cyprus in 1571 was, from an Ottoman military point of view, a direct consequence of failing to take Malta 6 years earlier, where clearly the strategy of the new Sultan Selim II was to avenge his father's failure while learning the mistakes from the Maltese campaign. If one were to look at the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, where he oversaw crushing victories such as the one at Rhodes in 1522, the one at Mohacs in 1526, the victory over the Safavids concluded in 1555, you would see that there were only 2 notable failures, both of them sieges targeting Habsburg vital bastions. First Austrian one at Vienna in 1529, and then Malta, which was under Spanish Habsburg protection, in 1565. Moreover, the Great Siege of Malta from 1565 was in fact part of a longer conflict between Spain and the Ottomans that lasted from 1560 with the failure and defeat at Gerba until 1581 and a truce signed between the Spanish and the Ottomans, ending one of the most turbulent military half a centuries that included Malta, Cyprus, and the famous Battle of Lepanto in 1571. However, that half a century contained a crucial set of events, which I have said would link Gerba, Malta, and Cyprus in such a way that has demonstrated that the War of Cyprus was in fact a relocation of conflict between a defensive Spain led by Philip II and the Ottoman Porte from west, where Malta was, much eastwards towards the Aegean and ultimately Cyprus, an economically vital cog of the Venetian Commonwealth. And indeed, the sieges of Malta and Cyprus bore striking similarities. John Guilmartin Jr. argued that the failure of Malta was a turning point that prevented the Ottomans to expand in the Western Mediterranean, and because of that, Cyprus, a much closer, accessible target, was preferred by Selim II at the cost of breaking peace with the Venetians. Both Malta and Cyprus were important symbolic and strategic bastions for the papacy. Also, both of them required huge Ottoman armies and the best commanders from the corsairs such as Dragut Reis at Malta and Ulush Ali at Cyprus. The fundamental difference between those two sieges would be that at Cyprus, Mustafa Pasha had complete control over the entire Ottoman force, eliminating discussions with Piale Pasha. Mustafa had learned the lessons from Malta, and his strategy was far more direct, precise, and determined. Fabriano Falchetti, Venetian prisoner after the fall of Nicosia in 1570, relevantly argued through his account that had Mustafa Pasha and Piale quarreled and procrastinated as they did in Malta, Cyprus might have resisted the siege, with Famagusta holding on, just like the fort of St. Michael did at Malta. Therefore, the Christian victory at Malta in 1565 had an undesired consequence for the Venetian Republic, who, apart from information regarding Ottoman naval movements, remained neutral and did not send any galleys or soldiers or assistants to defend Malta, fearing that it would have drawn the wrath of Suleiman, who would attack any of the Republic's dominions in the eastern Mediterranean, thus gravely disrupt its Levantine trade. For Philip II of Spain, on the other hand, it was a welcome relocation of naval warfare from Malta and nearby Sicily to a far distant Levantine region that did not concern him. Cyprus would prove to be a more accessible conquest for newly arrived Sultan Selim II, who knew the challenges of trying to get Malta, and instead focused on a Cypriot kingdom that had been in Venetian direct control for less than a century. Thus we conclude the Malta Miniseries that focused on the Great Siege of 1565, while also tying it with elements from the Venice series. I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode, the Malta Miniseries as a whole, and the podcast. Please stay tuned for more episodes from the Wondrous History podcast, and make sure you subscribe to be up to date with the newest material.